drawing. Drawing in my life is like this. It's funny, I do have one. I have one. I have a blue crayon in my pocket. So here's what happened. I did a drawing. I think it was of some kind of magic pirate ship. It was all scale drawing with cannons and the things. It was like some kind of crazy ship, and bunnies or something were on it. Anyway, I was a very little kid, and my mom went, "Wow, it's a great drawing." And she stuck it up on the refrigerator. And I looked up and there was my drawing up on the refrigerator, and I was like, wow, I'm famous. And I was. Across the whole kitchen, I was famous. Something clicked in me, like when you teach a dog and it finally gets fetch or something. And that was it. And I've had a crayon in my pocket since that day. I draw and 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 I draw. And when I'm really, really happy, I draw. And when I'm really, really frightened, I draw. And when I'm trying to figure something out, I draw. But to draw is at the most basic level to take from the what's not there and to make it happen there. And at times when I'm particularly uninspired, I just end up with circles and circles and circles and circles. And then I turn them into spheres. And then the spheres become landscapes and castles or my friends and my lovers. I think that as long as I can still draw. I mean, it's interesting to draw, the word to draw. To draw. People think draw, oh, you're drawing, like you're scribbling on some paper. But you're drawing from some other place. Like you draw water out of a well. You know? That's what it is. Drawing is drawing. You're drawing from the world of the spirit, the world of the unseen, and the world of thought, and the world of experience, and the world of memory, and the world of impression, and everything that is not. And you draw from that, and you manifest it in 2 dimensions on some flat surface. That is drawing. Well, I guess there's it's a kind of a small library of archetypes. Everything from naked ladies to rabbits to gods, fish, astral fires all over my stuff. That sense of a container that's containing the astral fire that's around the figure. It's obsessively in all of my work. All of these things are kind of part of a synesthesia, a collision of form and color. But there is a kind of symbolic language. I would say that in search of set dressing and using imagery, the set dressing of eternity is this collision between the exquisite of detail and the exquisite of form, and the destroyed, like the ruin. These timeless flavors I'm always putting together in my work. There's decay, and there's this kind of leaping forth of spontaneous new life wreathed in flames. It's very Blakean. I guess the technical word is scumbling, where I use a knife. I lay up consecutive layers of color and I attack it with a knife. I've painted like that from as early as I can remember. It was the way I knew how to paint. I didn't know how to paint any other way. There was this way of painting that came with me, came with the package, and it's a very dangerous way to paint because you only have one shot. I make that mark and that mark stays because I've just dug through my paint and the paint is drying, so I have no time to look back. I think I do it to create intensity. I mean, some people have drug addictions or bad relationships. I just, I have drying paint. Well, I mean, I haven't always been doing glitter. Glitter's maybe the last 5 years or so. I used to judge glitter, and then I saw the light. I'm excited by any kind of new paint that I can get my hands on. I keep looking. You know, I'm in the shop, I'm looking for something new. I'm looking for some new color, some new effect. After a certain point, I started to move around. There was a lot of pressure to sort of stay in New York. I wanted to travel. You know, I wanted to travel, and I had money. Suddenly I had money to go places. And I went to Italy, and I went to Switzerland, and I went to Ireland, and I went to Mexico and Indonesia. I had a lot of exhibitions in all of these places. I was able to travel. This was the great thing for me. For me, the painting was a vehicle that was carrying me. And as long as I kept getting stuff on the thing, with the thing, you know, and kept generating imagery, I could be anywhere I wanted to be. I could be in northern Italy up by the Lake Como, and I could be in, you know, Ubud in Indonesia. It was an incredibly empowering experience. In Indonesia, I was focused mainly on storytelling, a narrative, and I wanted to break into 3 dimensions, so I was doing narratives on these petals of these flowers, and I made these sort of chrysanthemum-like creatures, huge, 10 feet across, and each petal had a scene in it. It was like a compound narrative. Again, I would refer to the Impressionists, the sense memory. I was trying to materialize in 3 dimensions, a sense memory, the narrative, the onrush of memories. It was almost journalistic. You have a rush of memories. You remember things all at once, don't you? All of the experiences all at once. And in this case, it was painting, you know, painting and wandering and making love and getting loaded and running from cops and making things. And how do you pack all these moments into a single structure? And these were experimental paintings. They were very complicated to put together. You'd screw them together with, I had hundreds of screws numbered, and I'd end up with these huge flowers of imagery. And then, you know, I shipped them all back to Los Angeles, and nobody knew what they were about, so I ended up selling the petals one at a time. I couldn't find anyone to pay what it was worth. I kind of, you know, she loves me not. There goes another memory. It was amnesia. It was sort of like a growing amnesia. That whole period of work was incredibly rich. I did one piece in encaustic on little tiny wax heads. It was the first lines from Duino Elegies, which is a great poem written in Trieste in the turn of the century by Rilke, a German poet. And it's, if I cried out, who would hear me up there among the angelic orders? And if I took him to my heart, would I shrivel? Beauty is only the first touch of terror that we can still bear. It awes us so much as it so casually disdains to destroy us. And I did this phonetically, little heads. I ended up selling it to a poet. Jim Carroll, the Basketball Diaries, he bought it. I had a nightclub here in Venice. I was running an after-hours club. And it was quite a scene, and we had a lot of art events. Week after week after week after week, we were doing arts events and spoken word and theater and poetry, and we had some of the best of the best early DJs in the city were coming out of the Pink. But I was going down the tubes physically. I had to get out of Los Angeles at that point. And I, on invitation of a friend of mine, went to Ireland and got a little cabin in the middle of the Wicklow Mountains on the military road. I was doing this basically to save myself, get myself out of this sort of frenzied environment. And I locked myself down and did a body of work that was just incredible. That was my first big show in Zurich, that work. And it was unbelievably unique. No one had seen paintings like this before. They were having a hard time going like, well, it's not figures, foregrounds, backgrounds. I was annoyed at having to describe it for them. I was actually ill-equipped to talk about the work. Having done it, I needed, interpreters. But I did sell some work. I did sort of manage to put myself together and sort of rescue my health by just getting out for a while. When I came back to the United States, I was approached by, directors and talent scouts and producers and stuff, mainly because of my visibility at the time. I was sort of this young, pretty boy artist, and I had a tendency to blow people off and blow off these opportunities, but I did end up in a few films. And Frank Rodham approached me and said, I want you to be in this opera musical, Tristan and Isolde, I see you as Tristan, blah, blah, blah. And I thought it sounded pretty cool. And I got to be in there with Bridget Fonda and drive around in the desert in a big Cadillac and kill ourselves in a bathtub in some hotel room. And that was great. It was a very wild time. The night after the show, I had $3,000 in my hand in cash and a brand new camera, and witch stole my suitcase out of the back of my pickup truck, and I gave all my money to the gypsies. It was like some kind of black magic. It was crazy. Somehow the resonance of having embodied this archetype ended up spilling out into my whole life. This whole time I don't know if I'm creating this dream or just at the mercy of it. I had this memory of Dublin being this incredibly healing, powerful place for me. And I ended up in Dublin for 5 years, hanging out in Catholic churches and Masonic temples and cleaning up ancient holy well sites. It was an incredible time, Dublin in the early 90s. And I was obsessed with the Masonic Lodge, with the Scottish Rite Masonic Temple. They're right there on Molesworth Street. And there were all these symbolic tools lying around. And I thought, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make a symbolic tool. I'm going to make a symbolic, powerful tool. And I didn't know how. And I made a bunch of hammers. They're all sitting in Marina Guinness's kitchen. All my hammers and sledgehammers and pitchforks and shovels and stuff, the things leading up to the thing. Coincidentally, I had some friends who were working in the Joyce Museum, which is a big round tower with huge Georgian ceilings with little angels with violins and sort of architectural detail that had been all storm damaged from the rains and the leaky roofs and had fallen off the ceilings. And we had to go in there and fix it all up and get that stuff back up there and looking nice. And there was this amazing Polish plaster master and his son, and he was on, up on stilts, and his son would be throwing limestone up to him, and he'd be up troweling on the ceilings. And then down there in the museum was a case with James Joyce's death mask in it. And this was a powerful fetish. Well, not to name names or do anything incriminating, mysteriously this mold material, latex and gauze material, came into contact with the face of the greatest time-distorting literary figure of the 20th century, James Joyce. And I came into possession of these molds, and I produced a series of sacred instruments. This is a shovel. It's a portrait of the artist as an old tool. It's James Joyce, who is fantastically significant. James Joyce and Marcel Proust, right, were the two literary figures who bent time, who distorted our temporality. This instrument has been used in sex magic rituals with crazy goth Satanists from the San Fernando Valley. It's been used to beat rats in hallways in Henrietta Street. It's a very well-traveled shamanic instrument, having everything to do with our temporality and our journey. So it's timeless, it's priceless, and it is, in the domain of, magical objects or mythical objects has huge significance that I still actually possess it. It's amazing, considering how much how many times I've tried to sell it. I'm amazed that it's still in my possession. We used I think I have a poster here of it. They did use it on the cover of the Bloomsday calendar. This is for the Bloomsday calendar at the James Joyce Centre in Dublin. Yeah. Bells are fantastic. There was this beautiful man named Leo who has a foundry. I hope he's still alive. I hope Leo's still alive in north side of Dublin. I don't know, actually, it was Black Pits. And he had a foundry, and I was making these shovels and my tools and things. And I walk over and I was like looking at this track on the ceiling. This old rusted piece of metal. Went all the way out and out the side building and into some other building, and I was like, oh, looking at that, going, wow, that's for carrying some pretty heavy shit. And he says, look at that pit in the floor. That's for making bells. And I was really fucking pissed off at the subjectivity of art at that time. Or making a sacred object. Oh, well, who says it's sacred? I say it's sacred. Yeah, it's sacred, okay. But I was really like stuck on my limitations in terms of framing something as sacred, framing something as proud. And a bell is not a subjective object. A bell goes ding. That's its job. It's not its job to look interesting, or to have an interesting history, or to be part of some interesting method. It's supposed to go ding. And at that moment I said, I'm going to make a frickin' bell. And I made a big fucking fuck-off bell. 300 pounds of metal. We had to get up with chisels and scrape the rust off the track. And I made it out of beeswax. And I made a bunch of them, actually. I made a bunch of bells. But the big one I made out of beeswax. So I made the beeswax blanket. They didn't know. I didn't even think I was serious. They didn't know what I was doing. It kind of looked like this. It was sort of had two cans sort of spread out in the middle, and it said thank you on the side. Because I was grateful. I was grateful to be able to make a bell. I was grateful to Ireland. I was grateful to Marina Guinness for giving me a place to sleep. And I was grateful to be alive. So I made this thank you bell. And inside was a poem by Rumi. When they poured this bell, we had to chisel, we had to make special tools because all the stuff had been lost and broken to bring the crucible full of the hot metal all the way from the other, like across the alleyway. And I'm sitting there with Niall, the guy who's helping me, my assistant, and they had to heat the mold for the bell up red hot. Because if you poured that much hot metal into that big of a mold, it would explode. And they had to do it in a pit and bury it in coals, because if it did explode, they wanted it to explode up and blow the roof off instead of out and kill everybody, right? So I'm there, and of course, I've taken a collection around the city of Dublin for my bell, getting people to give me money and give me old pennies and give me old silver candlesticks, because bell metal is part silver, it's part nickel, it's part bronze, it's part tin. It's a very, very like distinct mix to get make something real bell metal. So everybody who gave me their grandmother's silver candlesticks wanted to come to the pouring. So I had like 100 people there, right? And of course, Leo's terrified because he thinks if this mold blows up, he's gonna kill 20 people. They're pushing everybody back and screaming and yelling. And of course, we don't have the tools to pull the crucible, so we're using like 2x4s, and they're bursting into flames, pushing this huge crucible full of molten bell metal across the street and through the building on this track that we just chiseled all the 100 years of rust off, because they hadn't made a bell in 100 years. And they come down, and we get it in place, and then we look, and there's like a 10-foot drop, right? to a target this big to get into the mold. This big, from a bucket the size of a trash can full of molten bronze. And we don't have anything except 2x4s and little iron hooks and a chain and stuff to pull this thing, to aim it. It was insane.